The world of mixed martial arts consistently produces some of the weirdest stories and feuds that you'll see from any sport. This is especially true when the MMA community crosses over with other subcultures and facets of the media. In recent weeks, one of the most interesting stories to arise from this never-ending carnival of absurdity has been the rising hostilities between previous subject of the channel, Brendan Schaub, and well-known MMA journalist Ariel Helwani. The once smoldering tensions erupted into a full-blown conflagration that threatened to consume the entire Fighter and the Kid universe. For those of you who don't follow mixed martial arts that closely, Ariel Helwani is one of the most well-known and well-respected journalists covering the sport. Helwani has worked for outlets like MMAfighting.com, Fox, and ESPN, and has hosted several different shows, chief among them the MMA Hour. Over the years, he has cultivated a large audience and arguably become the face of the MMA media. As someone who has been covering the sport for 15 years, he's obviously no stranger to Brendan Schaub. While the relationship might have been a little strained at times, it was never as openly hostile as it became in the last few months. This dynamic can be attributed to a specific series of events that escalated the underlying tensions to their boiling point in October of this year. The first skirmishes took place on July 19th, when Schaub was doing his usual stick of firing off uninformed and poorly thought out takes on stories from the MMA world, softballed at him by one of his underlings. In this particular instance, Schaub was giving his opinion on an interview Ariel Helwani had done with Dan Le Batard, where he aired his side of the story of parting ways with ESPN. After stating he had never personally worked with Ariel, Schaub went on to call him the Stephen A. Smith of MMA and said that Ariel is the standard for journalism in the sport. Schaub then proceeded to spread absolute rumors and hearsay he's heard about Ariel from everybody who has ever worked with him. Quote, "The only thing I've heard about Ariel, and I've heard it from a million people, does not play well with others. Everybody I know who's ever worked with him does not have nice things to say. Everybody I've ever talked to in the MMA space says do not work with him. Now, I never judge a book by its cover. I'm sure people have had their issues with him. I've never worked with him, nor would I ever have any reason to. He's a journalist, not what I do. But I've never had any issue with him. But everybody I know, people I consider friends, people in that MMA journalist space, say he's an absolute nightmare." End quote. Schaub then went on to dredge up the old story about Ariel Helwani losing his UFC credentials after breaking the news of Brock Lesnar's return at UFC 200. Now, if you're not a hardcore MMA fan, this is likely a bit of lore that you're not familiar with. The long story short here is that way back at UFC 199, Ariel broke the news that Brock Lesnar would be returning at UFC 200 before the UFC could officially announce it. Zuffa then had Ariel and two of his colleagues immediately escorted out of the building. Ariel's press credentials were rescinded by the UFC, and he was banned for life by the company. The UFC's reasoning for doing so, according to Joe Rogan, was that they claimed Ariel had been told not to leak the story of Lesnar's return, as they believed a mole had leaked him the story. Ariel called bullshit on Rogan's mole story, and to this day has remained adamant that he was never given any such warning. Frankly, I believe him. There are many criticisms that can be made about Ariel, but there has never been any indication in the past of him leaking information that was told to him in confidence or off the record. No matter how many hits he would have gotten from releasing the Brock story, it just doesn't seem worth it to throw away an entire career of journalistic integrity. In the aftermath of losing his UFC credentials, Ariel would make an emotional response on the MMA Hour.
It's hard to be told that your career is over when you don't think you did anything wrong. But I can assure you, I'm not going anywhere. Rich Eisen asked me earlier today, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just cover something else and maybe that opportunity will come and I would love it. But I'm not going anywhere. It's going to take a lot more to get rid of me.
Ultimately, the ban on Helwani and other MMA fighting journalists was lifted, but Ariel has claimed that the UFC, and Dana White in particular, have held a grudge against him and continually attempted to hamstring his career.
And then I started to get nervous. So from the moment it was made public in mid-May that I was going to ESPN, and at that time it had already been out that they had signed this deal with ESPN, the UFC did, Dana White tried to get me not even to make it to my first day. I mean, he raised hell to try to stop me. My first day was June 15th, tried to stop me to get to the first day. Now,
on the Below the Bell episode, Schaub was essentially parroting the UFC company line that Helwani leaked the Brock story, at one point saying, "You made this bed, you gotta line it, Papa." Even though there has been some friction between Ariel and Brendan over the years, this appears to be the moment that set the wheels in motion for the greater conflict to come. And from here, things snowballed out of control. On August 29th, Schaub and Callen were doing their knockoff fight companion for the Jake Paul vs. Tyron Woodley boxing match. Joining them were Rampage Jackson and Josh Thomson. At one point during the fight companion, Thomson pointed out that Ariel was working the Showtime broadcast for the fight instead of Schaub. Schaub responded by insinuating that Ariel got the job because he turned it down. This comment from Schaub appears to be the straw that broke the camel's back for Ariel, as in the following episode of the MMA Hour, he announced himself as the temporary head of PF Chang's.
But at least for today, you are looking at the new CEO, CFO, and COO of PF Chang's.
For those of you who don't know, PF Chang's is a nickname for the Fighter and the Kid subreddit, and more broadly, anyone who is aware of Brendan Schaub's rampant douchebaggery. By dropping the name of PF Chang's, as well as some memes associated with the subreddit, Ariel was making it abundantly clear to Schaub that he was willing to go to war. Helwani would later address the Schaub situation in more detail during an interview with Aljamain Sterling. He stated the story about UFC 199 that Brendan told was 1000% false, and said he had gotten his information from Joe Rogan, who in turn got his information from Dana White. Furthermore, Ariel stated that Brendan had reached out privately to apologize. However, he added that he thought Brendan should apologize publicly for spreading these lies.
I've had my own issues with him. In fact, I'll break some news. He just reached out to me this morning, Brendan, and apologized to me for regurgitating false lies. And I said, thanks for reaching out, Brendan. I look forward to you doing it on the air the same way you said lies about me. You should probably go on the air and apologize and rectify. So I wait for that day. Until then, God bless.
With the Aljo interview over, Ariel continued to vent his frustration with the misinformation surrounding the UFC 199 situation. Then he officially addressed Schaub's comments about him being hard to work with and insinuating he got Helwani the gig with Showtime. After reiterating that he wanted Schaub to apologize publicly, he issued one final warning.
Leave my name out of your mouth, especially when you want to lie about me. Don't talk about how you gave me gigs, that I should be thanking you. Don't lie, because I will come after you. I will respond. So everyone better know, if they come at the king, you best not miss.
The following day, Ariel appeared on the Pat McAfee show, where he repeated several of the points he made about Schaub on the MMA Hour. Specifically, his frustration with Schaub spreading 5-year-old lies and talking about Ariel's character as a person when Ariel had never done anything like that to Schaub.
I had no issues with the guy, and that's why every time I'm like, why does this dude keep lying about me? Why does this guy keep why is he even talking about me? Like, he's sitting back talking about the media business and what happened to me at ESPN and the offer. I'm like, dude, you don't even know me. You don't even text me. I have no relationship with you whatsoever. Just keep my name out of your mouth. Stop talking about me and then clipping it off for clicks.
There wasn't anything particularly new said here, but it was proof that Ariel was not backing down in his position. The situation did take a bit of a strange turn when Josh Thomson and Big John McCarthy decided to weigh in on the growing strife between Ariel and Schaub. Big John counseled Ariel against acting like a tough guy because one day a fighter might decide to get physical with him.
My problem is this. If Ariel wants to continue on with this, whole thing, there can be the guy that's not as nice as Brendan who will say, all right, when I see you, I'm going to gangster slap the shit out of you across the stage, and let's see what you do about it. So, you have to be, if you're Ariel and you want to say, hey, I don't like what you've done. I think, you owe me an apology. Okay, you can do that. That's fine. Stop with the whole pro wrestling shtick.
Seemingly to echo Big John's comment, Schaub would vaguely make mention of slapping Ariel on the following day's episode of the Lummox and Liver Spots podcast. During the same conversation, Brian and Brendan would both refer to Ariel as being sensitive. The following day, Ariel lashed out at Brendan and Brian in a 13-minute rant during the Q&A segment of the MMA Hour. During the rant, Ariel stated that he knew he wasn't going to get a public apology, and didn't find the private apology sincere. Furthermore, he believed the only reason he received the text apology to begin with was because he had dropped some of the P.F. Chang's lingo.
I knew he was never going to apologize. I know that wasn't even a sincere apology that I got on text. It's because I tweeted about it on a Wednesday, several days later, and there was a code word in there about a Reddit page that love him dearly. And then only afterwards, 12 hours later, did I get the quote unquote apology. And then I said, all right, are you going to do this publicly? Because you said some lies about me publicly. So it seems like the natural place. Of course, I knew he wasn't going to come back and be as sincere as he was on this text on camera. He can't do that.
Continuing to expose the two-faced nature of Schaub and Callen, Helwani then claimed that after he appeared on the Pat McAfee show, he got a text from Brendan saying he didn't want a war. This led to a few interesting tidbits, like Ariel saying that after his rant about Schaub and Callen, he received multiple messages from people saying they had bad experiences with them.
Let's play this game now. How many people reached out to you when you said I was tough to work with? How many people reached out to you privately and said, oh, I've had some bad experiences with that guy? Because I could tell you how many people reached out to me after I had to say a few things last week. That's weird, right?
More importantly, Ariel addressed the comment made by Schaub that Showtime had edited something he said out of his Below the Belt segment.
And what was that part that you took out? What was that part? You want to beat me up? We're gonna go to the lowest common denominator. You're a comedian now. You got a great gig. You want to beat me up? The guy with the glasses, the guy with the suit? That's what we're resorting to. Something, by the way, that some of the toughest human beings that I've had on this show who sometimes don't like me have never resorted to. But is that the part that they took out, threatening me?
Ariel called them phonies a few more times and told them to get back to their 50 podcasts that nobody listens to. But after this rant, the feud cooled off a little for the next 2 weeks. There was a minor comment by Ariel on the MMA Hour from September 17th where he said that Brian Callen called him and apologized privately. Ariel elaborated by saying that Brian told him he didn't want any drama, and he would rectify the situation by clearing the air about UFC 199 and publicly apologizing.
He said that he was going to rectify this. In fact, his exact words were he was going to go on their show on Monday, clear the air once and for all, rectify this, clear the air about 199, about the stuff that was said about me, apologize, doesn't want any drama. It was a nice conversation. And my response to that was, great. I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say on Monday.
As you can probably guess, the apology did not materialize. I think it's important to pause here for a minute and acknowledge that this conflict could have been completely diffused by Brendan and Brian on multiple occasions by simply apologizing to Ariel or just dropping the issue. However, they decided to escalate the feud. On the October 5th episode of Below the Belt, Schaub was giving his rambling, borderline incoherent take on the article posted by Bloody Elbow calling for Joe Rogan to be replaced on the UFC broadcast team. His dissection of the article was predictably Schaubian, but there were some real gems sprinkled throughout. Like Schaub saying that with Trump out of the White House, Joe Rogan is now public enemy number one. After talking about the writer of the article, Schaub complained about the MMA media being talentless haters who have to talk shit to get clicks because they have never been in the storm, like him and other people who have paid the price. Specifically, he name-dropped Ariel Helwani and his negativity. He then took a thinly veiled jab at Helwani by saying that unless the MMA media makes hit pieces or has 17 guests on their show, nobody watches them. He went on another rambling monologue filled with the usual bullshit about the haters not having the talent, creativity, or work ethic to do what he and Rogan do, for saying that he and Rogan stay in their lane and don't respond to the negativity, even though he literally was responding to the negativity at that very moment, as well as throwing pot shots at Ariel being fired from every job. Let's examine these claims for a moment. Bappa loves to talk about how talented and successful he is, but he's a laughingstock in 2 of the 4 career paths he's attempted. In football, he's not even worth mentioning. In MMA, he's most well known for being on the receiving end of comical knockouts. The most famous moment from his MMA career was being told by Joe Rogan that he wasn't good enough to compete with the elite of the heavyweight division, and he should probably quit for the sake of his own health. In comedy, he's an even bigger punchline. His comedy special is infamously bad, despite attempting to bribe people into leaving positive reviews. Comedians openly mock him. And even the ones who don't want to burn a bridge with him publicly mock him behind his back. I can say that for certain. If we're going to talk about Schaub's talent, we need to look no further than the people who actually got him where he is today. Without Callen and Rogan, Schaub would probably still be collecting concussions like Funko Pops and Bellator or bare-knuckle boxing. Simply being in the storm doesn't mean that your opinion is worth anything or that you have any talent as a broadcaster. If it weren't for Brian Callen and Joe Rogan piggybacking him to wannabe influencer status, he'd be one of those people talking to no one. Ask yourself, who is tuning into the podcast created by that guy who got knocked out by Ben Rothwell and Ronda Rousey's husband? There are plenty of fighters who, despite all the success they had in the cage, aren't able to draw a few thousand people to their podcast. Conversely, you have people like Jack Slack and Luke Thomas who are well respected in the MMA community and have managed to create a good living from breaking down fights. I will say that Schaub is extremely talented as a thief and bullshit salesman though. Like his handler, Ballerina Toes Rogan, Schaub has cultivated a following of gullible simpletons who parrot his dim-witted opinions. Likewise, he's attracted a collection of whack-packers and ass-licking hangers-on who hope to use Brendan's minor fame and success to springboard their own non-existent careers. This parasitic relationship works both ways, though, as Schaub steals from everyone around him. He's managed to get away with stealing from every comedian he's ever been associated with, down to stealing their laughs and catchphrases, without ever being called out by one of them. He stole the name of his Thick Boy Bike Club merch line, and then created some of the most generic merch I've ever seen. Then there was a time he used the image of Scrooge McDuck on one of the Fighter and the Kid shirts and got sued by Disney. On another occasion, he used a Spurs logo on promotional merch for a comedy show he was doing in the parking lot of the AT&T Stadium, and was warned by the Spurs that if he sold any of that merch, they would sue him. Coincidentally, did you know that Schaub is selling mystery Thick Boy merch on his website? I wonder what could be going into those packages. Is this the famous creativity and work ethic he's always going on about? Maybe it's when he parrots talking points directly from Luke Thomas, but makes them less coherent. Or could it be that time he remodeled the set for Below the Belt and stole the background from ex-Monster Energy photographer Courtney Hendo? I guess it was pretty creative to do a comedy special with no comedy or start a podcast when you're less articulate than Tito reaching for those grapes or teas. Brendan has no response to these criticisms. It's the same carousel of deflections. Oh, they're jealous. They're haters. They wouldn't say it to my face. I don't respond. I don't even look at the comments, B. I don't see this stuff. To say that people hate Schaub because he is successful is just a deflection. There are plenty of fighters, comedians, and podcasters who are all more successful than Brendan Schaub and don't get a fraction of the hate he does. Just look at fellow Roganites like Tim Dillon. He makes $200,000 a month from Patreon and is widely liked by comedy fans of all stripes. Where is the 50,000 strong subreddit posting about him on a daily basis? I could go on all day listing people more successful than Schaub who don't get the same level of hate he does. So it's simply a non-argument. The reason so many people hate Schaub is because of issues like his dishonesty and hypocrisy. Case in point, the way in which he claims that he and Rogan stay in their lane. You don't. That's the entire reason the situation got out of hand. You spread rumors and hearsay about a man you admit you never worked with and barely know. That's the fucking opposite of staying in your lane. And the thing is, I doubt Schaub has grasped that concept even by the end of the saga, but I digest. This rant from Schaub was the tipping point in the feud with Ariel. The next day on the MMA Hour, the gloves came off completely. This is a 20-minute deconstruction of Brendan Schaub on every level, and it's honestly glorious. Now, I'm not going to go over every little comment that Ariel made, but I would like to highlight a few major points. After thanking the PF Chang's crew for showing him the video, Ariel makes what I think is one of the most salient points in the entire one-sided battle, when he says that Brendan Schaub thinks he's better than us.
I came away from that little clip with a few conclusions. Number one, the biggest one was, this man legitimately thinks that he is better than us. I want you guys to realize that. This man thinks he's better than us. And when I say us, I don't just mean me. I don't just mean the MMA media. I mean you as well.
In my opinion, this is an issue that is often overlooked about Brendan, but it cuts to the heart of who he is and why he is hated by so many people, including former fans who have turned on him. This sense of superiority is what led him to make statements like saying that the opinions of critics don't matter, the same way that a homeless person's opinion or the opinion of a cat wouldn't matter to him. which was ultimately the reason the members of the TFATK subreddit ended up adopting the moniker of homeless cats. Schaub does genuinely believe himself to be better than anyone who isn't more successful than him, and it's why he doesn't even have a second thought about treating lesser individuals with disrespect. It's what allows him to think he can talk trash about someone like Ariel without getting a response back. Ariel went on to address several of Schaub's comments regarding the MMA media, specifically the hypocrisy of Brendan complaining that they have never walked the walk, while simultaneously making wild claims about hacked journalists writing articles to get clicks when Schaub himself doesn't know anything about journalism.
So I don't agree with it. But every time there's an opinion piece, they're like, this isn't journalism. First of all, you talk about people who don't know what you've been through. Who are you to talk about journalism? What the hell do you know about journalism? Because you sit in front of a microphone? You know about journalism? Because you've been interviewed by people you know about journalism? You don't. Talk about the hacks. Talk about the guys, who need to talk about you guys for clicks. First of all, they were talking about Rogan. They weren't talking about you. He has the talent, you don't. Let's just call it like it is. He's the guy with the $200 million Spotify deal. You don't.
From here, Ariel just begins tearing into Schaub. He mentions the ripped-off merchandise, Schaub being unable to sell out comedy shows, and then accuses Brendan of paying guests to be on his podcast. After explaining his own career journey to clear up all the rumors and lies spread by Schaub, Ariel turned the tables on Brendan and asked him how his career was going.
Now let's talk about you. College football, how'd that go? How'd NFL go? How did fighting go? How did comedy go? How did podcasting go? How did TV go? Did you achieve your goals? Did you realize your dreams? Did you make it to the top?
Following this, Ariel brought up Schaub stealing from the MMA media, like he has done with Luke Thomas, Brian Campbell, and Ariel himself. This leads into the crescendo of Helwani's 20-minute rant, where he says that if there is ever a 40,000-strong subreddit devoted to hating him, he hopes the people around him tell him to stop.
If it ever gets to that point where there's 40,000 or so people whose sole mission is to expose you and to call you out on your BS, please tell me to stop. Your own community turned on you. Your own community figured you out. And we know you're rattled by it. And I'm not a proponent of online bullying. But dare I say you brought this onto yourself, my man.
So how did Special Needs Joe the Camel address this drone strike from Ariel? Well, he called an emergency episode of TFATK titled Journalist Beef, where he was already drunk. Neither Brendan nor the TFATK correspondent from Afghanistan referred to Ariel by name. Brendan did, however, compare the journalist to Ellen DeGeneres and reiterated statements about the journalist being hard to work with. Then Brendan devolved into just repeating, "You've been fired from every job," like a literal redacted. After rambling for a while, terrified Brian Callen said that he doesn't have a beef with Ariel, to which Brendan replied that Ariel isn't important enough to have a beef with. He followed this up by saying that Ariel has to do this because things haven't worked out and he's back at square one. Braindumb then went on some idiotic rant where he said he was going to invite Ariel to a comedy show, but the venue didn't allow soy boys. Yes, this is what the best brains for the arts actually used as an insult. He followed this up with a really baffling statement about Ariel not being allowed in Las Vegas. Then he made a very crucial mistake. He said, "I dare you, come on the show. You won't talk like this to my face, or I'll fly to New York." To say this response was pathetic would be an understatement. Not only were they afraid to address Helwani directly, they also brought nothing new to the table. They showed that they were out of ammunition, but Ariel wasn't. When Ariel addressed the TFATK reply on the October 13th episode of the MMA Hour, he started off by covering the points already mentioned about Schaub drinking and being afraid to say his name. He also discussed some past experiences he had with Brendan and Brian, including their appearance on the MMA Hour many years ago when their PR person asked Ariel for a favor. Things started to heat up about 6 minutes into Ariel's response, though. After replying to Schaub's nonsense about Ariel being banned from Vegas and being invited to a rinky-dink comedy show with 25 people in attendance and 50% off discount codes, Ariel dropped his first tactical nuke.
I was like trying to rate it. I was trying to rate the response. Best I could come up with, 1.7 out of 10. You know that number, right? You've heard of that number, the 1.7, lowest rated comedy show in the history of IMDb.
Watching this MMA Hour live was hilarious, as the second Ariel dropped the reference to the IMDb rating, the live chat lost its fucking mind. But this was just the beginning, Bubba. Ariel didn't even miss a beat when he pivoted to Brian Callen, who apologized to Ariel in private because, according to Heelwani, he's afraid Ariel will open up the closet and release everything in there. Ariel then changed gears for a few minutes and talked about Josh Thomson and Big John McCarthy before pivoting back to Schaub and all of his hangers-on.
And so let's go back to the thing, because you got a bunch of people, again, people trying to make it about themselves. You got all the hanger-oners. You got this washed up, old Mufasa looking like character in my comments all day, all night, trying to get a piece of the pie, trying to get the rub, trying to get put over by Heelwani.
This is where the mistake of challenging Ariel to say it to his face came back to bite Schaub in the ass. He said that he would be happy to go on Schaub's show, and Schaub can bring all of his friends and joke writers, but Ariel will be doing it from his studio. They can simulcast it, stream it, whatever Schaub wants. Or, if doing it through screens isn't good enough, Schaub can come to New York and they can do it in Heelwani's studio. Then the madman actually fucking did it. He called them live on air.
Why don't I just call you right now? I'm sure you're watching. You don't think I have the balls to say any of this to your face? You think I'm actually afraid of you guys? What are you going to do? Beat me up? What are you going to do? Slap me? That's what you're going to resort to? Fathers, professionals, broadcasters? What are you going to do? You don't think I have the balls? Here we go. Here's balls. Who's going to pick up now? It's from my phone. Didn't tell the guys in the back about this. You don't think I have the balls to say any of this to you? You don't think I have the balls to say this to you guys? Let's try Callen. He wants to make peace. Let's call him right now. How about that? He texted me. Here we go. Let's see if he picks up. Nothing? What happened, guys? Oh, am I catching you off guard? The same way you talk shit about me over and over and over and over and over again? Is that catching you off guard? What is that? Come on, dog. You think I'm afraid of you guys? Call me back. I'll be here all day.
There were a lot of other devastating blows thrown by Heelwani during this epic 30-minute rant, like when he made fun of Brendan crying over Chris D'Elia, or when he roasted old Mufasa again. But actually calling Schaub and Callen was something else, and it finally seemed to get the point across that it was probably in their best interest to squash the beef. On the October 18th episode of the MMA Hour, Ariel revealed that a conversation had taken place and a promise had been made.
I will just say this. A conversation happened and a promise was made. We're about to find out if a promise was kept. If a promise was kept, I'm done. If not, I'll see you Wednesday. But for now, I'm standing down.
Now it was only a matter of waiting to see if that promise had been kept. Not so much. Later that day on Below the Belt, Schaub made what you could, if you were being extremely generous, maybe call an apology, but not really. It was more a 20-minute rambling mess where Schaub didn't really accept any responsibility for what he did, but did say he spread a narrative that had been painted about Ariel. And boy did he use that word a lot. I'm not even sure he knows what it means, or if he's just repeating something like a kid that heard it for the first time and thinks they know adult words now. Either way, he just uses it to deflect any responsibility for spreading rumors and misinformation about Ariel, because that was the narrative painted about him. And if it sounds like I'm talking in circles, you have no fucking idea. Schaub did at the very least say that he would stop spreading these narratives, and he would never badmouth Ariel on the show. For his part, Ariel acknowledged the non-apology on the October 20th episode of the MMA Hour, while also acknowledging that it did really seem like an apology.
For the lies about ESPN, I would love to sit here and say, I accept your apology. The problem is, I didn't hear an apology. I actually did not hear an apology. I didn't hear, hey man, I'm sorry. That was my bad. Now, am I going to be an a-hole and sit here and demand? No. We're moving on.
That being said, Ariel seemed happy enough with the fact that Schaub was willing to drop the whole issue and stop lying, which honestly was all Ariel asked him to do in the first place, and Ariel was okay with moving on from the situation. Helwani did take a few shots at some of the other ass lickers associated with Schaub, like Josh Thomson and the dolt old Mufasa, But by the end of the response, Ariel had hung up his apron and stepped down as CEO of PF Chang's.
My point is, I can't keep doing this because I'm never going to truly get that apology. I'll never get the mea culpa. I'll never get the I'm sorry. But what I got a couple of days ago, ultimately, is I think the best that I'm going to get. And I don't want to make a grown man cry. I don't want to make a grown man sad. I don't want to make him upset. And let's just move on.
And that is where we are now. So after all these shenanigans, what is the moral of the story? Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that if you are famous enough and have enough followers washing your balls, you can get away with bullying people less famous than you for years. Eventually, though, you will cross the wrong person. Someone who has a big enough platform to expose the skeletons in your closet to the world. Someone with nothing to lose and no reason to hold back. Someone who will figuratively and literally call you out. It remains to be seen whether or not Brendan will actually learn anything from this conflict. I think he'll keep Ariel's name out of his mouth for a while, but I doubt he changes his ways or stops spreading misinformation about other people. Because, at the end of the day, I don't think Brendan believes he was at fault for any of this. He seems delusional about all of it. Throughout this entire affair, his excuse was that he was just repeating a narrative that was already out there about Heelwani. During his non-apology, he really tried to mitigate the severity of his feud by ironically creating his own narrative that they were both being pieces of shit and saying things they didn't mean, such as Ariel taking shots at his comedy shows. He also tried to claim that he only went after Ariel when Helwani started talking about people associated with the show, like the guy in the back with the websites, which isn't true and doesn't even make sense. It seems like none of the lessons from this battle have gotten through to Brendan, and the only reason he even slightly bent the knee was because he knew he couldn't keep up the fight. Not because he had actually recognized that what he had done was wrong, but simply because he was outmatched in this arena. At least for the time being, that is where the story ends. I tried to condense the plot of this ridiculous saga into something easy to digest for people who aren't necessarily MMA fans or homeless cats. But if you want to dig into the details, I would suggest visiting the Fighter and the Kid subreddit and watching Ariel's Q&As on the subject. I'll put some links in the description for those of you who want the full experience. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. And a special thank you to my supporters on Patreon, who help make these videos possible. Thank you, Jabron CK, Big Gay Lion Supporters of America, Fightback CBD, Brendan Schaub's Bitch Tits, Ryan Cedor, Zelda Z, Dan Thomas, Mike Roballs, Big Raj Homeless as Fuck Mans, Firebrand, Trey Bowles, Lord Svoldemort, Snepsts, Ryan Williamson, I Said No Cops, Paulo Gomez, Alex, Ratman, Max, Kyle, Tamby Helmick, Bart Wackenar, The Son of Man, Neem, and Kevin Howard.